Hey y'all, you got the team from the Solver here, and we want to show you a little bit in what to look for, or at least what we look for when we are running sims. This could be for a showdown slate, could be for a classic slate, but we do have a showdown slate brought up here. Without further ado, I'll turn it over and we can dive right in.
Hey, so I just kind of wanted to look at a few things that I and just like a lot of us here at the Solver look for on the sim results page that's other than just sim ROI. I think a lot of people are looking at the sim ROI a lot, which is obviously important, but I want to add some context to what it means and what other things to look for as well. So I think this first example here that's showing a really, really large ROI, this is in the massive $20 contest for Thursday Night Showdown. I will go ahead and click this little tab here to bring up this page and just explain a few of the things on here. So sim ROI is obviously the ROI that this lineup achieved in our simulations. The cash rate is how often it cashed. Top 1% rate is how often it got in the top 1%. And then first place, how many times it got first place. And then first through 10th, how many times it got into the top 10. So as you can see, this lineup has a really, really massive ROI here. So a lot of times people will just think that it's a really, really good lineup. I do think this is a good lineup, and I do think there's a lot of value in playing lineups with a high ROI. But as you can see here, the cash rate on this lineup is really low. And we can see that a lot of the time, this lineup actually finishes in the last percentile. So, in the last 1 percentile, 13% of the time, this lineup is going to end up finishing like almost dead last. So if you look at the lineup, I think this actually makes quite a bit of sense. This is a lineup that doesn't have Puka Nacua, and it doesn't have Christian McCaffrey, and then it doesn't have Mac Jones, which are arguably three of the better plays on the slate, especially Puka and McCaffrey. They're going to get a lot of fantasy points in many of these instances. The reason this lineup has a very good sim ROI is for a few different reasons. First off, in the game scripts where both Puka and McCaffrey fail, or in the instances where, although unlikely, it does happen, where both of them fail, there's almost every other lineup in the field has at least one of those two guys, maybe both. So then in those instances, this lineup just ends up doing really, really well, and it doesn't have competition competing against other lineups that are similar to this one. So as you can see here as well, out of the 25 times that this lineup gets in the top 10, it ends up winning 24 times. And it also is not projected to be duped. So I don't necessarily think playing a lineup like this is bad. This is absolutely a lineup that I would play if I'm playing 150 lineups. But I do just want to note that some of these other things matter as well. If you're just playing single entry and you're playing lineups like this one in single entry contests, you're probably likely to run out of money and deplete your bankroll before you can actually realize your ROI. So this is probably not a lineup that I would ever play in a single entry, or if I'm playing one lineup. If I'm playing 150, I think it's totally fine to include a few lineups like this that win in very weird instances and very weird game scripts. But I just kind of wanted to provide some more info on what to look for other than just the ROI. Hodge, is there anything that you look for other than the ROI, and is there anything else you prioritize here on the screen?
Yeah, definitely. So one thing, whether it's showdown or the classic slates or afternoon slates, we have sims for both the small slates too. I really like to take a look at the 1st through 10th finish places. So I might identify a lineup. Let's see if we can find one here. Okay, cool. So we look at that lineup that has 22 first place finishes, but 47 1st through 10th. I think it's like the 5th or 6th lineup down there. I actually really enjoy these types of lineups where I'm getting a ton of shots on goal and it has a very high percentage of finishing in the 1st through 10th. And the reason there is these projections aren't perfect. Establish the Run is hands down, the best place to get projections, but they're still wrong and they're not perfect. I think that type of a lineup to me typically plays very, very well, where you're now embracing some of the variants of the Sims being wrong, right? So not only are you just taking on maybe a little bit lower ownership, but you're saying that the Sim might be wrong on that lineup that is obviously finishing first a lot. So I like to find those clusters. And typically what I'll do is I'll save that lineup to my lineups tab, and then I'll make some different iterations of that, and I'll start simming through those and seeing what that looks like, maybe with a slightly different 2v2 or whatever the case may be. But yeah, I really enjoy the 1st through 10th column there, and just simming, sifting through those and then resimming.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. That's definitely something good to look for here. That's why we have it. The dupes, I think, also very important. I do think lineups that are duped can absolutely be good to play. That's not something that I ever really think about too much. Obviously, in Showdown, we've gotten to a point where the field is playing pretty efficiently. So if you like, if there are good lineups, people will play them, and it's just a matter of how duped certain things are. Also, the top 1%, something I look at actually quite a lot, especially in classic slates. I really, really like getting lineups that end up very high in the top 1%, especially since also the number of sims we run is not infinite. If we ran infinite number of sims, then I think the ROI would be way more important than the top 1%. But since we don't run an infinite number of sims, I think looking at top 1%, especially in classic slates, is extremely, extremely important. In showdowns, I think it's maybe a little less important because of the dupes and how those dynamics work. Like, you can end up in the top 1%, but just be like extremely duped. And the ROI, I think, is capturing a lot more data there. But on classic slates, I'm looking at top 1% stuff in detail.
Yeah, the one other thing that I should have mentioned too is the projected ownership column. So I love to sort and filter by this and just get an idea of what the field is going to be doing, and taking a look at projected ownership relative to the sim ROI. So the first thing here that stands out to me is that lineup that has a sim ROI of 254%, but has a significantly less projected ownership than some of the those top lineups. So I'll start to compare and contrast and take a look at those types of lineups, and then you can really just take a look and like, hey, do I think this is a well-constructed lineup for the contest that I'm entering it in, which in theory should be the contest that you're simming it for. But something like this where it comes in at a low pwn because you're getting a 1.8% owned captain. So you have to look at everything in context too. And that's why I don't just save that lineup and enter it into the set. I think it's important to really take a look. Something along this lineup, I would imagine this lineup actually did pretty well last night, other than maybe the Blake Corum stuff. But, Kendrick Bourne up there at 3.6. So yeah, I think it's just very important to look at that. But I love looking at pwn, seeing where the field is going, because keep in mind the sim that we ran here has no rules, just variance applied to it. So just getting an idea of where the field is going, and then taking a look at where the sims actually think the good lineups are, and that can help you identify some lineups to at least save, tag, and then resim and go from there. But I think on tagging and a few of the other different things that we have here at the solver, we'll jump into another video here, and we'll give you guys a breakdown of that. Anything else that you wanted to cover before we do that?
Nope, I think I'm all set on this one.
Cool. We'll see you guys in the next one then. Peace.